So I'm going to say something really cliche. Oh, if you have an internal strength for a product that no one wants, that's a problem.
What is strategy?
Defining how a brand is going to show up in the world.
What about traditional media?
Oh, man.
Is there a way to create such a legacy and such a permanency in a digital world?
I think pretty successful. There can be. Good salespeople make a lot of money for a reason, right? It's like they're good at what they do. It's really important. What's your favorite campaign of all time? We'll see if I agree.
It's my pleasure to welcome an exceptional strategist, a group strategy director at Wieden+Kennedy, ad agency that didn't like advertising but is responsible for some of the storytelling success behind McDonald's, DoorDash, and Ford. He built some great brands, helped in launching some successful startups, and crafted many interesting stories. Elliott, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Pedro.
So I'd like to kick it off from your wheelhouse. What is strategy?
Oh man, that's such a broad question. In all honesty, it's one of these things I struggle with because like my extended family, friends, they don't really know what I do. And it's a bit of an amorphous term because I think when we say strategy in business, it can mean everything from kind of upstream business strategy to corporate level strategy. In the world of marketing and advertising, it can have a bunch of different utilities. But in short, I think in the world of advertising, it's really about defining how a brand is going to show up in the world. And that can mean a lot of different things, and it can be articulated in a lot of different ways. But with kind of research and insight and rigor, your strategy should ultimately inform what you stand for, what you do, how you show up, how a brand could ultimately behave. But it also tells you what you shouldn't be doing. All in the effort to essentially have a sticky place in people's brains that is hard to forget. So in a lot of ways, strategy can be utilized in different capacities in the world of marketing, but kind of on the day-to-day basis and what we do. That's kind of like how we would define it.
Okay. So how would we then, from that standpoint where you spend most of the time, put a different angle to a business strategy versus the brand strategy?
So I think like a good example, I think, is a corporate level strategy is like, what should we be selling? And maybe the answer to that is shoes, which would be more like the business level strategies. Business level strategies, okay, we need to be selling shoes because we know there's a demand for shoes amongst a certain group of people. So that's almost like the directive of kind of like, okay, you have all this information and build a business case, like why that might be the case. Creative strategy, and we'll call like advertising or brand strategy, is almost a step below that. So now we know kind of what kind of the larger kind of corporate vision or business strategy might be. Now we actually have to figure out kind of like how we are going to resonate with a specific group of people. And so that is where kind of like a strong understanding of kind of, the culture at the moment, what other brands are doing, how you actually position the brand, all of these things kind of fall within kind of the larger umbrella of kind of creative.
How is different building a strategy for the new brand versus the strategy for the established brand?
A startup versus something that doesn't exist?
Yeah. Something that you're creating versus something that you're
That's a good question.
Growing.
It's hard, right? Because I think the benefit of working with established brands is that there's like already pre-existing, they're known, right? There's a legacy there. Like a lot of this stuff and all that kind of informs, how you show up in the world and what you say to people. So in a lot of ways, it's like very, very, it's different for sure. I'd say that Honestly, I forget the question again. I'm sorry. Well, sorry.
So what? How is different building?
Building established, right? I'm
versus
sorry.
the
Yeah. So
established?
the equities that you kind of have, and by equities we really just mean like what are the pre-existing things that people know about the brand, like what's ownable about it. So for Coca-Cola, it's the color red and all these other things. Maybe a tagline. People have existing memories, rituals, and behaviors around those brands already. So that is, you're working within more of a defined context. A lot of the times you start working with brands is because they've been struggling. So you might have to do some work to kind of uncover some kind of unique things that we might find are maybe underutilized. And then, how do we kind of show up in a way that feels true to who that brand is? A new brand is tough because you essentially have to do a lot of that establishing on your own. In a lot of ways, it has a tremendous amount of freedom, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't require a lot of work to kind of like define kind of like what that brand is and what they stand for. From a marketing perspective, it also means that you have to invest your dollars because you have to start building up those associations in people's heads. And I think without a clear understanding of kind of what your brand stands for, it's going to be hard to kind of create those associations, because ultimately what we're trying to do when we're building brands is create like a series of heuristics that exist in people's heads. So you want to be able to be a shortcut. And so, the benefit of an existing brand is that you might already have some of those things kind of in people's heads. For mass market brands, for newer brands, it takes a lot of kind of like buy-in from the various stakeholders, alignment around kind of like what are the principles of this brand, like what is our ethos, our brand belief and brand purpose, who are we, like what is the market need and how do we show up in a way that's going to resonate with those individuals. So they're similar in the sense that they're trying to achieve the same thing, but you're essentially starting from scratch. So it's a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of fancy marketing words out there.
Sorry.
That's okay. But I want to put it back down to a level a little bit.
Okay.
Just because someone may listen who's not as versed in marketing. So brand ethos, brand promise, how you show up in the world. Basically, it's all covered by one word, I think, storytelling.
Yes, I think the storytelling is the articulation of those things, I would say.
Yeah. And when you're launching a new brand, how complex approach to crafting that storytelling should be?
For me, I'm a big fan of simplicity. Strategy's got to take all these kind of complex inputs because, you'll be sitting there and you can really just go crazy with the amount of information that you receive. And it can be overwhelming. So I think the job of a strategist and in strategy is essentially to take a step back, look at all the information and be able to read the tea leaves a little bit. So from a startup's perspective, if you're launching a new brand, it's really important that you kind of align on kind of what the brand stands for. And ultimately, that's all that really matters. What you call it, there's a million, you look at a brand pyramid or read different books on strategy or hear people talk. They have different terms and words for these things. None of it really matters, to be honest. It's just like a clear directive in terms of what is it that the brand is ultimately out to achieve and what are the values that it stands for. And I think if you have that agreed upon, and the reason why it's good to put it on paper is because then it becomes concrete that everyone else can kind of agree to. And that's what I mean, everybody else, I mean internally for sure, but if you're going to be working with partners and stuff, it just becomes easier to kind of truly understand. So what is the thing that you would paint on the wall of what's that kind of belief or word sentence that would sum up kind of what the brand stands for? That's ultimately the most important thing. And so when we say stuff like brand purpose, it doesn't actually mean that the brand has to have a pro-social purpose per se. It's not like you have to go out and be solving a lot of the world's issues, but it does have to have a reason to an answer to why it exists.
Your experience, what was the most efficient channel
in terms of like
in
where
terms
to,
of like launching,
traction, and like launching new stuff
and reaching your target audience?
It's tough because I think it really depends on not to be a bit of a not as a cop out, but like audience and kind of category. To your point, make a big difference. And it depends on if you're a funded, brand, if this is like Procter and Gamble launching like a new product, right? Versus like someone that's bootstrapping out of their garage, or someone that has Series A funding or something like that. But, all that to say is that like cash is always going to be tight. So I think it's like identify the advocates, your potential advocates, brand advocates. So literally people in the world, like who's your audience, truly understand what the needs are, right? And what the value is that you bring, and try to over deliver as much as you can. Because ultimately people will talk, like people that are, really excited about something are more likely to talk about it. It's the hardest thing to crack, obviously. Like word of mouth is very, very difficult. But if you identify what those needs are, it will then inform which channels to choose and therefore communicate with. Something like social media is like obviously cost effective, generally speaking. It's also really hard to fight through a lot of the noise. And I think on digital channels in particular, unless you're just some amazingly talented content creator that is just really good at like creating stuff that gets a lot of traction on social, then you're going to probably have to invest in it in some capacity. Some stuff like social is interesting because you can actually test and learn in a way that's like fairly inexpensive. So for brands that are kind of have to be scrappy, it's not a bad way to kind of like test things. But I'd say that instead of going off and trying to invest in kind of like a lot of expensive media placements and stuff like that, there's ways that you can kind of grow brick by brick. And then essentially, depending on what traction that you're getting, it allow you to kind of like adjust how or where you might communicate.
What about traditional media?
Like TV, all of that?
I think it's obvious that for the mass brands that are existing out there, TV is still relevant, I want to say. But I'm namely putting myself in the shoes of someone who's about to launch or launched their brands. They are not able to afford TV for sure. Or if they're lucky in their Series A or Series B, they might have a bigger budget. But I'm thinking about the traditional or guerrilla media that is not online, that is not digital.
Okay. Yeah, I mean those things again, like I think there's a lot of research on like out of home and like all these things. I think anything that is going to get attention, it sounds crazy, like the execution and kind of what you're doing to be disruptive. I hate that word, but sorry. But to essentially just like shock people into kind of paying attention or getting people to pay attention, I think is ultimately going to be the most efficient use. So like, I think those types of, say, if we want to call it traditional kind of activations or guerrilla stunts and stuff like that can work really hard. Because I think it's tough, right? Because sometimes clients will say, we don't have any money and we want like something that's gonna, go viral or get attention, and it's hard to do. I'd say that there's a lot of creatives that are very good at it. It's tough to pull off. But I think channels like that are smart ways to kind of like, if you're thoughtful with like how you utilize, I don't know, the placement or where it's going to show up. It gives you more creative freedom to essentially be a little bit more attention grabbing, right? So
yeah, I love it. And the reason that I smiled is because you mentioned two words, and disruption is not the one, but the two words that I've been talking a lot about. One is like basically grabbing the attention, because I think it's the biggest currency today for any business even. Because we're overwhelmed with the information and with everything that we're reading and we're consuming. I think I read it actually not as recently, some 10 years ago, that we're consuming, and you probably have the better data than I do, but we used to, some 10-ish years ago, we were consuming information at the pay like 10 times more than the people were like
10 years previous.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why I think the attention is breaking the clutter of noise that is out there in the market is one of the crucial things. The second reason that I smiled is because you mentioned the execution, and that's one of the questions that I have for you. So you are building strategies.
Yes.
And my personal opinion is that strategy is important, and I have split opinions of whether it's more important, equally important, or even a bit less important than the execution. And you mentioned the execution.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more about that, given that you're on the side of the strategy.
Yeah.
What was the most successful strategy that you created, and why was it successful?
Oh, man. Well, first on your first point on like kind of execution is that it's kind of everything, right? So I think, strategists like to kind of sit in their ivory tower a lot of the times and just do a lot of thinking. But ultimately, that's not what people are going to be seeing. So like the execution on any type of campaign, creative asset, is like will make or break it, right? And a lot of the times the strategy might just be okay, but the execution is excellent. Just really kind of novel, stands out, is going to get people's attention. That's like the harder thing to do and like dictate success more than I would say just whether or not you wrote a really good strategic brief or you have like really good insights. So I think like that is like obviously really important. Strategy is the best thing that I've been a part of. I mean, it varies. Like there's been a lot of really successful campaigns. I tend to always gravitate towards things that are super simple and intuitive. So, I mean, years ago at Sidley in Montreal, we did something for Molson, actually, for Molson Export. I think it was the 365th anniversary of Montreal. So it's like a birthday party. And Molson Export was a brand that tended to decline as marketing budget got pulled away from it, as you would know, right? So like beer in particular tends to decline when there's no marketing behind it, and then that money would go towards the growing brands. But because it has such a huge legacy in Quebec, they wanted to do something. But with the budget that they had, we couldn't really buy a TV spot or something like that. And then, as soon as it goes off the air, it's gone forever. So what we identified was really understanding kind of like the core drinkers, and that, I like when we did the case video, it was crazy. There was a guy with a Molson Export tattoo like over his chest. Like this is like, a beer brand, yet, it's associated with a certain period and certain values within that specific part of the city of Montreal and in the province of Quebec. And all these guys buy their beer from the local dépanneurs, right? And these places in these different neighborhoods are kind of like, people go out of the way to go to their favorite one. It's kind of a gathering space. It's where they buy all their beer. But a lot of them are kind of in disrepair. So we were walking around the city, and one of the creatives kind of pointed to like a Trident sign, like a gum sign out of an old dep. And it had been there since the 80s or 90s. And it was like, that was like almost like a portal through, I don't know, back to the 80s. You're like, wow, it's like brought back memories from when I was a kid. So we're like, maybe we can do something with those depths that would, solidify Export's legacy within the city, and at the same time knowing that this is a one-time thing. So, our client was amazing, and she was like, well, this would actually then qualify maybe we might be able to find budget from like other parts of the business, not just traditionally marketing. And it started at like, I don't know, 5 or 10 deps, and it ended up going to 25, I think. And so what they did is our design team did a like custom brands and naming and designs for each of those dépanneurs. So if you go around the city of Montreal now, they're still there, all in the same neighborhood.
So cool.
And so if you just look at like, okay, we bought a bunch of billboards for that amount of money, we'd have to take them down in 2 to 3 months. And yet that's going to be there forever. And it's directly serving, or, it's in the face of and very visible to the people that we really want to get to. So that's kind of I think maybe an example of what you're referring to earlier, of maybe like a traditional approach, but still finding a way to kind of extend its impact. So, I mean, in terms of, I think we actually won a gold pencil. I don't remember if we won any awards, and not that those are really important. But I can't say it was like, the best business case in the world for strategy. But I think in terms of like what we could accomplish and something that would have a lasting impact, I think that was fun, because it was just like kind of different than we would traditionally do.
I love it. Yeah. I love it because it's simple.
Yeah.
It's very budget effective, builds legacy, and there's also a lot of emotion. I think those are kind of key components for success.
Yeah, it's fun.
Is there a way to create such a legacy and such a permanency in a digital world, in a digital communication?
I mean, it's maybe not in the same way. I think, but outside of channel, like if the intention is really the permanence of the brand, you can, right? Because it's just kind of squishy definition of and everybody's kind of maybe perceptions of the brand might be a little bit different. But I think if you use the channel, like the channel and something like digital channels and social are tools to help you achieve those things. So yes, something like export will never probably have beyond social media very much anymore. So that was a channel that was available to us. And therefore we're able to do that. Now, again, back to the beginning around kind of like, social channels can be really useful for a number of different reasons and a number of different implications and applications. So I'd say that, yes, they can definitely be a tool. Obviously, the permanence is not necessarily going to be there in the same way it might be, say, in like, a physical thing that's going to be there forever. But I'd say that's true of most forms of media. They tend to go away. So the point is to, think of like a long-term brand building over time and be consistent in kind of like how you, again, with your values, how you show up, what you're saying, and what heuristics you're trying to build.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what that story has to be consistent, and it has to be repeated over and over again. Because I think especially when we're in the shoes of the brand builder, marketer, strategist, or even the execution, we tend to neglect the fact that we're talking to different people. And just because we said the story to one doesn't mean that we should keep it in silence or not say it again and again and again. And it becomes a little bit, and I'm again talking from my own experience, it becomes a little bit exhausting to repeat that story over and over again, because especially if you're doing it, I mean, when you go to mass media, it's easy, right? But that's when you work with the big brands and you have big budgets, so you can do different things. But if you're working for a small brand, and especially if you're starting off, and that's I want to take the both angles, like when you're starting as a small brand, creating brand, that repetition needs to be out there. You got to talk about it.
Yeah.
Even when it becomes dull and boring for you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like marketers get bored of their brands, right? Because they tend to work on them for so long. But just because it might feel like tired, you have to like look for indications in the outside world whether or not it is. And I in a lot of ways, the job of marketers, and particularly like on the client side, is that they really should be brand stewards, right? Like they should be protecting, evolving. And again, like, the landscapes change, so brands need to evolve with it. But you have to be really careful that you're not going to dilute or eliminate the things that people truly like know about your brand and resonate with people. Those things are really hard to create. It takes a long time. And so to scrap them because, I don't know, people want to be, just change things up or feel like it feels a bit tired. Like you need to be looking at what the leading indicators of those things could be and then make decisions accordingly. So I'd say very, very common thing. And I think we've all been a part of it if you've worked in the world of marketing, because it's like, oh my God, we're going to be doing the same thing again next year. And it shouldn't necessarily be the same, but it should be coming from the same place. And again, building up kind of, and those, like if we're talking about kind of long-term brand value, that's where those things in. And I'm not, those things come in. And I'm not talking about like the value that people kind of perceive and if it like they're kind of like quote unquote values as an organization, but truly like what it's worth financially. The biggest brands in the world, they trade at some insane multiple of their total book value, right? That's like the value that people ultimately are going to be seeing in the brand. It's a little bit simplistic of a way of looking at it, but generally speaking, it's true, right? So they're worth 75 times their whatever they're trading at 75 times more than they're physically worth, and that's done through a lot of hard work and consistency.
Yeah. So. And I cannot agree more to that because it takes that repetition and that consistency. But what would be your advice for us, like the startups, the entrepreneurs who are kicking off out there and want to build their brand? They realize that it's important. They're hopefully listening to us talking, and they're thinking like, hey, I want to build a brand. Where should they start?
Most brands, most startups are going to be launching and starting for some type of reason. So I think, a lot of the times, like really good founders have a really good understanding of kind of like why they're building the product service brand that they're building. And I think a lot of the times, as they kind of scale and they get more advice and all of that stuff, it tends to kind of divert that a little bit, right? So you're talking now with like, you have more stakeholders, there might be investors, you're getting advice from a lot of different people. And all that stuff is really valuable. But I think as long as you're able to kind of like stay true to like, what value it is that you're bringing through the brand. And again, finding ways to like articulate those, consistently. And it doesn't always have to be the same way, but just being consistent and be dogmatic about kind of staying true to those brands. Because again, like if you have a good understanding of what you stand for, then you'll know kind of like if you're going to launch, say, a second product under that brand, you'll know whether or not it makes sense or if you should do it. There's elasticity in there in terms of like the types of products and brands that you could either associate with or add. But the reality is, being true to kind of, the values of what the brand stands for ultimately is going to be the thing that's really important. And I think it's just like understanding those things. And it's literally like there's brand models and stuff like that. You can write this stuff down, and it's very, very accessible.
So 2 simple things: know why are you doing what you're doing, and then what is it, the value that it brings to your target audience.
Yeah. I'd say that like,
or potential customers, whatever we call it.
Yeah. I think like your reason for being, right, I think is a big one, I think. And then being able, and like, again, you'll have different terms for this stuff, but even it's not really a brand thing, but like your value proposition and stuff like that. Like just like the basic understanding of, the business that you're in and why people should carry the value that you're bringing to them. And then just staying true to those things over time.
And this brings me to another point that I wanted to discuss with you. So I've had a discussion in the previous episode, and I also had this discussion numerous times. I don't remember if you and I talked about it before, but they're kind of dual approach, or it's not a dual approach. It's there is a difference in how the businesses or brands are launched. One is coming from the internal strengths or product-led, as David said.
Yep.
And the other one is coming from the outside, from the market, and basically market-led, or looking into what are the needs out there.
Yep.
So that me as an entrepreneur can fulfill it.
Yeah.
What is a better approach?
If you have an internal strength for a product that no one wants, that's a problem. So I'd say that's like not great, right? And you think of all these kind of industries that are shrinking, right? These markets that are shrinking. Alcohol is like one, obviously, and in different ways. There's segments of it that are growing en masse. It's declining. Younger people aren't drinking like we were. So I'd say that, a competency within an organization is extremely valuable. But if you think of like where, I'd say like market for sure, in terms of like where the opportunities might be. And I think within those markets too, it's like, what are the needs that are being unmet and can you meet them? And the reality is, or what will resonate? Because again, it depends on the category, but a lot of categories, and I know people are might push against this, but it's true, are really like, there's not a lot of differences, right? So name your kind of mainstream CPG. A lot of the times they're trading on kind of product benefits, right? So
CPG being consumer packaged goods.
Yes, exactly, consumer packaged goods. So like if you think of even, we'll use beer because, we both worked in it for a long time. It's like the liquid, I'm sorry to say, is pretty much the same, right? Like there's different preferences and flavor profiles. Quality will vary depending on how much time and effort people put into the product. But the thing that will actually make it move off the shelf is literally like the brand, because that's why it's actually a fun category to work in. A lot of categories like that are fun because it's so dependent on kind of strategy and creative.
Apart from beer, what would be the other categories?
Name anything that's kind of like commodified. So like, again, like water, right? Like soap, like most of these things, like there's not, people are going to be loyal, quote unquote loyal. There's like a lot of debate around kind of like if brand loyalty exists too, but like people are going to essentially reach for a product, and in honesty, like there's not going to be major differences between them in terms of how they function, right? And it kind of goes back to the kind of the importance of staying true to kind of what that brand stands for, because ultimately that is going to be your unfair competitive advantage. It's also the one thing that you can still legally do. Creativity is a weapon for growth. It just is. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is building a brand actually gives the power to your business to grow.
It can be a growth vehicle, big time. I think like the good ones, the strong brands and like some of the younger brands that are, I would say, like brand led, we'd say, or brand forward, or really thinking about their brand, have that kind of competitive advantage, because it means that when things get stripped out, people aren't going to be saying, questioning the quality of the product necessarily. There's probably it's got to be a good product, obviously, or no one's going to engage with it in the first place. But that said, the thing that's truly going to make you distinctive and stand out is kind of like how the brand is built.
How different should the strategy be in terms of like communicating versus creating an experience versus selling?
So I think they're all kind of like outcomes, to be honest. So I think like foundationally, again, if we go back, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but kind of the audience, kind of like what need that you're filling, truly understanding kind of why the brand exists, staying dogmatic about that, then all of the other things kind of become, channels or extensions of that. So, getting people to know about something is really important, right? And so again, back to this idea of brand and being interesting, it's like, creativity is like one of the last few remaining legal ways to have like an unfair competitive advantage. So if you're able to kind of like stick within people's heads, you will reap the rewards in a way that people that are just essentially, because the thing is with tactical, and by the way tactical, I mean like you're just trying to like do something that says like, I don't know if it's an organic product, we're organic. Well, everybody can kind of say that, or maybe even offer a similar product. As soon as you divest in like your sales operation, or say you have someone going out and handing out samples or selling on the street, whatever it might be, once that stops, then your cash flow stops, right? Completely. Like you're not going to be generating any type of sales. So there's like while sales and everything are an extremely important part of like of a brand's kind of like way of growth, obviously, because that's the avenue. It can't be the single thing that is ultimately going to get the product in people's hands. It will be points of distribution essentially dictate success. But you also have to have like brand salience, which is essentially like how noticeable you might be, distinctiveness. You need to be, again, resonant, and feel like people actually like want to seek you out or pick you on the shelf. And if you do that, then everything else becomes, a function of operating the business.
How successful creativity can be if there's no strategy behind?
I think pretty successful. It can be, right? I have like, I don't know. I mean, this is going to sound like a tired comparison, but System 1 is a creative, we'll call it like a post-testing, creative testing platform that looks at how people resonate emotionally with something, because we know that correlates actually with sales. And so I think they ran a video of cows eating in a field. I think that's what they did. And it performed better than 50% of the ads in their database. And they have every ad in the world in their database. So I think it just goes to show you, like, I think sometimes a lot of marketers are really obsessed with kind of like making sure that you're saying, the product attributes, right? Like it's made with this because we know that people think that's important, right? This is why they buy the product. And a lot of times within the category that might be true. Maybe that's like one of the things that product attributes really important. But, in all honesty, you're better off just probably to be interesting a lot of times. Or at least it does not hurt like big time. Like I think you are really good strategy with bad execution, you're not going to be achieving much. I'd say like really good strategy with really good execution is lethal.
Creativity without the strategy can essentially spark the interest, break the clutter, grab the attention, and actually start the ball rolling.
Yes, I think so.
So sometimes just going out there and doing things and testing the market is much better than strategizing and over-strategizing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, in this business, we are out in the world, right? So I think like there is kind of like street smarts, I'd say. So as a strategist, there's different types of strategists. Some are like really academic and really smart, can, quote you all the literature, all of that. I'd say there's a part of that in me for sure. But in a lot of ways, like you want to be a bit of, you need to have some street smarts, if that makes sense. So in the world is like creative strategy in particular, I'd say it's like, again, my own opinion, I'd say it's almost better to be street smart than book smart. Yeah. So you need to have ideally a bit of both. But I think it's like, getting scrappy and putting stuff out in the world. Again, understanding kind of like ultimately what you're trying to achieve. I think is if you got nothing to lose, obviously. Now, again, just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks is obviously not a great approach. But I'd say that like, the more kind of like interesting, entertaining, novel, distinctive you can be, it just goes in your favor.
Yeah. Basically, creativity sparks the storytelling. And
it can, for sure.
Yeah. And then it's more important to go out there to talk to your audience because as much as you were mentioning about talking about the product benefits and everything, if you do it in a creative way, it will spark the emotion. And then eventually, as humans, we're buying with our emotions, not with our consciousness.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research to show this, and yet it still is like this common thing. And again, categories are different. Pharmaceutical is different from alcohol, is different from cannabis to something that is like, maybe not as potentially harmful. So there's a lot of different kind of constraints depending on what you're talking about, or the category in question. But I think it's like it's super, super important that we're kind of like creating stuff that can be as sticky as possible. Again, to your point before, it's like we're just taking in so much information and content all the time. And I think if we're going to be sitting there espousing product benefits, it doesn't really do that much. Because it's just very functional. And like the reality is like most of us make emotional decisions. A lot of the most effective work in the world of marketing and advertising is stuff that is emotive. Well, that's hard because often it's difficult to kind of make that a science and say like, can this, TV spot, for example, about, a relationship or something is like laden with human emotion, but it doesn't really necessarily say what the explicit product benefit might be. It's still going to be more effective as if you went out and said something about that benefit. Again, there's nuances to that and there's, category differences, but.
How much AI can help that creativity?
Yeah, I know this is like an ongoing debate, and I'm obviously maybe not as up to date as I probably should be because it feels like it's just changing all the time. I'd say that in general, in my own understanding, and like the rate of development and evolution of these tools is just like crazy. So it feels like everybody's opinion is changing on a monthly basis. I'd say that it's like really a tool, to be honest. I think the amount of because what it does is that it kind of takes these kind of abstract ideas and it kind of makes them concrete for you immediately. So from a production standpoint, in terms of like making TV commercials and stuff like that, with AI, we'll kind of see where that goes. I'm not super threatened by that. I don't think it really will do too much yet. Who knows? But I think throughout the creative process and even just like writing strategies and stuff like that, it's really good in terms of iterating because essentially it doesn't really function the way that you would think a computer would. It functions almost like human cognition. So for strategists in general, people can get quite isolated in their work. And then sometimes you just need like a sparring partner a little bit to kind of bounce ideas. In the absence of that, something like AI is not a bad source. If you're trying to get like factual information, it's one thing, but I think in terms of creative iteration, it's actually quite powerful.
The advice for the startups would be use the AI.
Yes, definitely a tool that will help. Because I think of like the amount of time and how labor intensive it would be just personally and like on just like getting to a specific place, right? In terms of like the amount of work that it would be required to like position a brand or write a creative brief. And so all those things are helpful, but now what it allows me to do is it's just like a shortcut if I'm going to say use ChatGPT or Gemini to kind of like iterate or bounce things off. So I might feed in a brief or an insight, say, into it, and it might generate, say, 5 bad ones or iterate on top of it. It won't be necessarily what we'll end up using, but it essentially just keeps the kind of the hamster wheel going.
But does it kill creativity if I'm relying on it too much?
If you're taking it as the output, it can't be the output, right? So in my mind, it's like it should be like you're the ultimate filter. So use it as like an additional input to kind of where it's going to get to. I don't see a world where you're ultimately going to get to a great place if you think that you're going to spit something into it and it's going to come out the other side and just be perfect.
And in terms of, well, you mentioned, but in terms of writing the strategies for the approach to the market, addressing the target audience, defining the target audience. Does it help?
Super important. I mean, cliche, but marketing always start with the consumer. So but with that, it's like, I think the word even consumer in a lot of ways, and the way that we traditionally think of these things is that they're automatons, right? Like we're these like little ants that go out and consume things. Like we're consumers. If they're like our market base is this big and like, all these things, but people aren't dumb and these consumers have like, are people with families and like values and interests and stuff like that. So like a deep understanding is like more of an anthropological study of kind of human behavior and kind of like their lives will give you a deeper well and give you kind of more sandpaper to essentially go and do something that is actually going to be saying something and adding true value. I'd say that if you're going to say, this is our audience, they're 18 to 35s and, they have a dog and 2 kids and this is their household income, it can't tell you very much. I will say though, those types of demographic profiles can get you to kind of general psychographic or you can make decisions on those things. But ultimately you'd really want to go deeper. So start with the audience, truly understand kind of what their needs are. And so like even on non-representative samples, so if you're going to doing market research for your brand and with your audience, getting a large sample size and a survey of like all their kind of like wants and needs and be able to have correlates and all that is great, right? Like that's good information. But once you have that, or even before, having a handful of closely guided conversations, and is often in people's place of comfort or like where they might be using the brand or the product. So if you're a motorcycle brand, being in their kind of being in the motorcycle shop or something like that, I think those types of things just like are like very valuable. When I first started in this industry, like I was very skeptical of the utility of qualitative research. And I think, conducted well, and it has to be structured with the right people doing it, but it's invaluable. And when it's done well, and again, when it's, thoughtful and everything like that, it's always added so much value. And it's just one of those things that it kind of, the penny drops a little bit when you're there and you're the one doing it. Because now instead of just like reading about these people on a page, you're like with them. So it just resonates and you get a deeper understanding in that regard.
And how much can you give an example from from the business?
From Wieden?
Yeah.
There's a couple things I could probably talk about.
Can you give me some good example from your recent work in terms of creating a great storytelling?
I mean, this like honestly, I think like, and it's not even stuff that I've been directly involved in, but I just think with what Wieden New York has been able to do with McDonald's as a brand over the last 6 years has just been really admirable and amazing for a brand of that size. And it's been, again, a huge part of their growth, I think, or just like not even their growth per se, but just the success of the brand. And understanding kind of like, again, going back to the things that exist in everyone, kind of people have an existing relationship with that brand.
What did they do?
Well, I think the main pivot for them was like, I think they're just like such an international brand, and it's just such a part of mainstream culture that you can get kind of defensive, I think, and a lot of brands are like this, right? So it's like, putting on kind of rubber gloves all the time and making sure that we're protecting the brand, which is really, really important, but also understanding kind of like people's relationships with it. So what they did is essentially they embraced the fan voice a lot more and kind of spoke to the fan and kind of everyone, right? And really owned it. And I think what happens there is that it unpacked human and kind of unveiled and uncovered these kind of like deeper human stories that are just ultimately going to be more resonant and feel true to everyone's experience and true to who they are. And it takes, I think, a tremendous amount of like, guts and guidance and all that stuff to be able to do that stuff. And so being, coming in and having the privilege of kind of working with those individuals in that brand has been pretty amazing. And I think it's like that, and again, like that is a strategic decision. That means that like it means that we can show up in ways for fans and for people in a way that we might have not before, right? And that ultimately, determines all the things we've been talking about, kind of what we're saying and where and all that.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. Like in order for brand to grow or for business to grow, that courage to step out of, well, call it a comfort zone, call it the everyday business is extremely important. Now we talked about AI, we're still kind of coming back to the importance of emotions and like being in touch with a human insight.
Yeah.
What do you think, based on the experience so far and the way that you see tools are developing and the industry is going, what's the future of the advertising industry?
I mean, it's impossible to really say, obviously.
Yeah.
It's like, it's changed. I think like they've been talking about this stuff for so long. I think AI changes things, and the pandemic accelerated, I think, a lot of the changes that we were seeing. But essentially, 20 years ago, the industry was saying like, the internet's going to kill us and everything's dead. And I think with, say, the holding companies kind of buying up independents for a long time, and now with everything that's going on, is that they're collapsing all of these kind of like iconic agencies, these big kind of brands within the agency world, some of which have been around for as long as the industry's really existed. So it's there's a huge shift, because the world of like the big five consultants, they all offer some type of creative service. The holding companies they've obviously been going through a bit of a tough time, like all the mergers that have been happening kind of with Omnicom and Publicis and WPP. So the future is interesting. I'd say that it's like I think it's gonna continue to shift. So if you look at Toronto as an example, there's a lot of very good independent agencies. Wieden, we're fresh from just opening over the last couple of years, but there's really good independent agencies that have had some global success too. Even like Mischief, as an example, is affiliated or works closely with No Fixed Address here in Toronto, which is also independent. You have Rethink and Courage and Broken Heart Love Affair, and like all the kind of the big creative shops tend to be independent now. And so when I'm thinking of kind of the bigger holding companies and what their role might be in the future, like they're going to continue on doing what they do for sure. And there's going to be some big kind of names within those holding companies that will continue to do good creative work, particularly in bigger markets like Europe and the US for sure. Their competitive advantage is scale and really the technology that's going into media buying. And all of that stuff. So ensuring that you can buy on scale and target really, really precisely. So, in a lot of ways, independent agencies are going to be dependent on them to ensure that, the right media gets to the right person. And that's the stuff that I don't think, independent agencies are going to. I mean, at one point, there was a lot of independent agencies that were trying to get into more of that space, like, invest in like, your stack and understanding kind of how the technology works. But it's just tough because like we just don't have the scale. So in a lot of ways, I think that where we're seeing the industry going now is, I think, probably going to at least persist for the near future, which is more brands and more clients are going to have their own agencies internally. They're going to tap kind of independent agencies to come up with kind of disruptive, bigger ideas. Stuff that is going to, again, help establish the brand and really inject some type of life into maybe a specific campaign, or whether it's a big brand reposition and stuff like that. And then the holding companies will continue to manage kind of like big global international brands where they're going to activate consistently across markets. And they're going to, continue to invest, in my mind, just like the technology that's going to be helping people kind of like, or delivering, the right media to the right people and iterations of those things. So I'm sure AI is going to play a role in that as well. We say the big C creative stuff, I still feel like agencies are going to continue to play a big role. That said, there's going to be fewer kind of jobs, I think, in that space.
So when I started off in the business, personalization and like approaching consumer in very specific, narrow way was almost impossible. We came to some great campaigns by the big brands that are that have done it. Thinking of Coca-Cola and their packaging, and I forgot a few others. But how do you think that will evolve within AI and technology? Like, how much will businesses, be it big or small, will be able to go a level below of the broader messaging and tell the story at the very personal level?
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology is there already, right? I think for so long, when this stuff was just starting, when you're getting like, you can get hyper targeted with specific creative assets and different messages and stuff, it became like an obsession. And I'd say like all of that stuff is very, in my mind, very short-term thinking. Yes, like ads that are personalized to a specific individual. So for example, if I walk out of here and for whatever reason, based on all the information they have on me, it just knows that I want pizza and there's a pizza place right across the street, I'm probably going to be more likely to buy pizza. But again, back to our example of kind of like your sales funnel and kind of how you invest in sales. The minute that gets turned off, then it ceases to be effective. So I think it's still like it is almost the barrier to entry for big brands, and like it has to continue to kind of invest in those types of channels, because it's a function of like kind of like lower. It's like kind of lower funnel, below the line targeted media. And it's cheap, right, by comparison. But
below the line being
below the line meaning, so in the world of marketing, we'll say like above the line, below the line. Above the line is more like mass. So like think of billboards, TV, anything like that. Below the line is going to be stuff that is like in the newspaper, on your phone, stuff like that. So at the retail level, I think it's like not going to build the brand per se. It can be done in conjunction with building the brand. If it's done smart, it might be able to. But I think, like, again, back to our part about product features, like if it's just going to be a bunch of product features or a sales offer or something like that, it might help convert someone. But I think long term, it doesn't actually do more than that. Essentially, you're trading on utilitarian things.
You mentioned short thinking. So a question to you as a strategist, if I'm starting my own business, how do I balance between short-term and long-term thinking and action? Because I probably have scarce resources. I probably don't have enough, even if I'm a startup with a substantial investment. Like, what is the recipe to grow the business? And where to focus, short-term, long-term?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't know, it's hard. I'd say that like long-term vision is crucial. But I mean, honestly, if it's a new business that's getting off the ground, like you might be living by the day, if not the week. So I think, again, like understanding kind of what the long-term objectives are and understanding kind of, again, like grounding in the kind of the foundation of why you exist. All of those things are really important. So you have to be able to kind of like continue to build out that story in a way that, again, is going to be resonant with people. But at the same time, it's like there's short-term priorities that are important, right? So all the things that we're talking about around brand is kind of like built over time, right? And it's really, really, really important. If you don't have any revenue, then the business doesn't exist, right? So like good salespeople make a lot of money for a reason, right? It's like they're good at what they do. It's really important. Yeah.
Now, one of the reasons that I started this podcast is because as you know, I like talking about the brand. Mm-hmm. And I want people to get a chance to get a different understanding and different angle on the brand. And the reason that it's called storytelling way to new value. So storytelling way to new value is because I think it's the way you tell the story important in both short term and long term, because you're telling it to yourself, because you're telling it to the people around you who are there to help you with the business, or to the consumer or the customer, whatever you want to call it. I do have the one last question that I end up the podcast with it, and it's what is your favorite brand?
Oh man, I feel like I'm going to say something really cliche.
Doesn't matter. It can
Like
be whatever you want.
all the ones. Honestly, I think it's like I always gravitate towards kind of the icons. Like, I mean, Nike would be obviously kind of one of the biggest, and kind of because I think if you look at kind of what they did and how they were able to build that brand, right, just as a challenger in the 80s, it's starting as like, you know, making running shoes to kind of like it's like such a permanent kind of place in mainstream culture, and you know, ultimately is like an apparel and sneaker brand, and just stands for so much more than any given product. And like, you have to remember that like when Nike's rise started to happen, it's you know, they were a challenger, and I think that type of challenger mindset is, you know, even if you're a category leader, is like really important. So, you know, a lot of really good brands will start as challenger brands and kind of build out accordingly. So, I mean, like, that's maybe a bit of a cop out. There's obviously really good ones. I'll say like right now, just like having like Ford is a great brand. McDonald's is obviously a big kind of iconic brand. I mean, everybody will quote Patagonia because the owner kind of stands behind his own values and how it's kind of articulated and built.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah. I mean, Liquid Death is everyone's favorite kind of like love story right now. I mean, you know, I think the way that the guy, the founder was a creative from an ad agency, and I don't think it's any. I think that has a lot to do with its success and kind of like how they kind of positioned the brand and
I'm so happy that you mentioned that example, because it just proves that you can build the business based on a great storytelling, even if you're not an expert in that product.
Yeah, and I think
space.
Yeah, and just like. I'm gonna get dragged for kind of like harping on this, but there's, you know, if you had gone to an investor and asked for a bunch of money to launch a water brand, you never, because it's like there's been the 3 established leaders in water for the last I don't know how many years. So again, I mean, it's a good example. Like, it's selling water, right? And yet, I don't know what their share would be now, but they're up there, right? And they're not old. And I think it just fundamentally is based on this thing. It's like, hey, like I go and I buy other categories and other products, and it's something that I want to pick up, and then I go and I buy water, and it's like just a plastic bottle. Same thing with like back in the day with Dollar Shave Club, back when it started. I don't know how long ago that was now. One small internet video and a bad category and a bad business model, I guess, for people, or bad for consumers. And then they were up there in share at one point as well before they got bought and everything else kind of happened. But those are very simple approaches to categories, right? And they knew exactly who they were. Yeah. And you can find a million examples like that, just good kind of like brands that kind of start from the ground up. So
thank you for the chat. To close off, do you have any question for me?
Do I have any questions for you? Yeah, I'll turn it back on you. What's your favorite campaign of all time? And I will see if I agree.
All right. It's a great question, man. Let me think about it. My favorite one is the one that I worked on for Jaffa Cakes.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not sure if I told you the story, but it was the brand was well established, but on decline. We had to rejuvenate the base, and then we repositioned, and we created, together with the great strategist from back in Southeast Europe, a great campaign and a great story to attract the young consumers, and it was just an amazing thing. But that's very personal. Other than that, a great campaign that I like. Probably Converse some time ago, and I don't remember well, but what is in my mind, like that's probably a vague answer, but what I remember is like just the feelings that I had when I was watching
Good feelings.
it.
There we
Like,
go. Mission accomplished.
but that's the thing. That's what, like, you asked me, like, I don't remember the campaign, like the Converse, when it was at its peak before Nike took over, because before Air Jordans and everything. I was a kiddo, but that's probably. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. No, it's good. It goes with me, man. It made you feel something. There we go. It's good. It's hard, more than most. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Petra.